They don't hate you openly, they admire you publicly. But behind the applause is a quiet envy, a slow erosion, a masked agenda. The truth is, your biggest threat isn't the enemy who shouts, it's the friend who claps when you win, but disappears when you need them most. They flatter, mimic, and smile, but their energy betrays them. In this video, you'll learn 10 sharp Stoic strategies to spot these false faces before they drain your peace. The Stoics didn't waste time decoding sweet words. They watched behavior, they listened to what wasn't said, they trusted calm observation over empty praise, because clarity is protection and silence is power. If you've ever felt tension behind a compliment or noticed someone shrink when you shine, this is your wake-up call, not to become paranoid, but precise hit. Like if you're done ignoring the signs, tap subscribe to build your clarity and your calm. Let's begin.
Number 1.
Observe their actions, not their words. Words can be rehearsed, words can be polished, softened, and coated in sugar, but actions, they reveal everything. The Stoics knew that talk was cheap and that character is found not in what someone promises, but in what they repeatedly do, especially when no one's watching. That's why Epictetus warned, don't explain your philosophy, embody it, because real virtue isn't broadcast, it's lived. Envious people, for example, often say the right things. They smile at your success. They nod along when you speak. They may even offer help or compliments. But if you observe closely, there's a mismatch. They're absent when your moment arrives. They go quiet when others celebrate you. They forget to show up when it truly matters. It's in these subtle betrayals of action, missed calls, delayed replies, avoided support, that the truth slips out. Consider Marcus Aurelius. As emperor, he faced constant flattery from those who wanted power. Yet he remained grounded by watching not their words but their conduct. He wrote in Meditations, "You must look within, break the melody of their praise and listen for truth." In other words, real loyalty doesn't need applause. It reveals itself in quiet, dependable action. To Marcus, the difference between a loyal friend and a cunning pretender wasn't in what they said. It was in what they consistently did when no one was watching. Think about your own life. Who shows up when it's inconvenient? Who celebrates you even when they gain nothing? And more importantly, who disappears when there's no spotlight on them? These are the signs that reveal intention. A deceitful person may use words to build trust, but they use silence and distance to erode it. Their excuses may sound reasonable, but over time, patterns speak louder than explanations. Another example, Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "Small minds discuss people, great minds discuss ideas." But observe this, not just in conversation, but in lifestyle. Someone who constantly gossips, who critiques others while doing little themselves, is revealing the pettiness that words often try to mask. They may flatter you today, but watch how they treat others. Their behavior is the clearest forecast of how they will one day treat you. Even in the business world, you'll find this pattern. Warren Buffett famously said, "You can't make a good deal with a bad person. And how do you know someone is bad to deal with? You watch how they behave when money's not involved. Do they respect people when there's nothing to gain? Do they deliver what they promise, or do they talk in circles?" Over time, their habits, more than their handshake, reveal everything. Seneca, another Stoic giant, once wrote, "What you do speaks so loudly I cannot hear what you say." That is the Stoic lens. The world is full of performers, but few are consistent. Few show up with quiet honor, time and again, without needing a spotlight. The Stoic path is not about suspicion, it's about precision. You don't need to accuse anyone. You don't need to confront or expose them. What you need is stillness, observation, detachment. Watch how they act when you're not useful. Watch what they do when you're not looking. This is where their truth lives. So don't let someone's charm fool you. Don't mistake friendliness for friendship. And don't trade your clarity for the comfort of nice words, because the ones who truly value you will show it. Not once, not loudly, but consistently, quietly, and without needing recognition. The Stoic doesn't follow speeches, he follows patterns.
Number 2.
Evaluate their response to your success. If you want to see someone's true nature, succeed, not when you're struggling, not when you're quiet, but when the spotlight finds you, because it's in your eyes that others reveal their resentment. The Stoics taught that success does not change you, it reveals those around you. And the most dangerous kind of envy is not shouted, it's swallowed. It hides behind smiles, but it festers in silence. When you share good news, pay attention. Do they celebrate with you? Or does their energy shift? Do they become strangely quiet? Do they change the subject quickly? Do they offer half-hearted praise or passive-aggressive jokes? Wow, must be nice, they say, with a smile that doesn't reach their eyes. These are not harmless moments, they're signals, and the Stoic learns to read them without bitterness, but with clarity. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." But the flip side is also true. When others face your success, they are given the same test, and many fail. They compare, they question, they minimize. Because your light reminds them of their darkness. Your progress reminds them of their stagnation. And instead of being inspired, they grow resentful. This is why Stoics train themselves not to seek validation. Because the more you crave applause, the more you become blind to envy disguised as praise. You begin to tolerate people who drain you, simply because they smile when they're supposed to. You accept shallow encouragement while ignoring subtle jabs. And over time, this erodes your peace. Take Maya Angelou's wisdom, she once said. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. When someone cannot be happy for you without conditions, without sarcasm, without comparison, without awkwardness, that's not your fault. That's their fracture, and it's not your job to fix it. Look instead for those rare individuals who celebrate without jealousy, who uplift you without inserting themselves into the story. These are the ones whose praise is pure, because it doesn't come from a place of lack, it comes from confidence, from peace, from real respect. Even in creative industries, this plays out clearly. Robin Williams, beloved by millions, was open about how certain people treated him differently once he became successful. Some grew distant, others stopped calling. And it wasn't because he changed. It was because he reminded them of their unfulfilled dreams. This is the reality many face when they grow. They don't lose friends, they reveal them. The Stoic doesn't judge these shifts in others with anger. He observes them with detachment. He adjusts accordingly. He protects his energy. He doesn't confront or accuse. He simply chooses where to place his time, his presence, and his truth. Because as Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Your growth is not a weapon, it's a mirror. And for some, it reflects what they're not ready to face. So don't shrink to make others comfortable. Don't dim your light to fit their shadow. And don't explain your success to earn their comfort. Let your growth speak. Let your silence protect it. And let the envy of others be your final proof that you are becoming someone they can't ignore. Because envy never announces itself. It leaks through the cracks when light enters the room.
Number 3.
Notice how they treat those who can't benefit them. Power reveals, but so does the absence of it. If you want to know who someone really is, watch how they treat people who can do nothing for them. The Stoics understood this well. True character isn't shown when we're seeking advantage. It's revealed when we have none to gain. A person who flatters the powerful but dismisses the weak is not kind. They're strategic. They don't value people. They value positions. This principle was echoed by Marcus Aurelius, who reminded himself daily that all people, rich or poor, high or low, share the same nature. In Meditations, he wrote, "You are a soul carrying a corpse." His point was blunt but profound. Titles, wealth, appearances, they fade. What remains is your conduct, and that conduct is tested most clearly in how you treat the invisible. So, watch closely. Observe how someone speaks to the waiter, the janitor, the intern. Do they offer eye contact? Do they speak with respect? Or do they act as if those people don't exist? This is where truth lives, not in how they treat you, but in how they treat someone who holds no social leverage. Because if respect must be earned, it's not real respect. It's strategy. The Stoic doesn't judge by flattery, he judges by consistency. And people who only behave well when it benefits them are revealing a fractured soul, one that is governed by opportunism, not virtue. Consider the example of Anthony Bourdain. Throughout his travels, Bourdain was known not just for his storytelling, but for his humility. He shared meals with street vendors and five-star chefs with the same reverence. He asked questions, he listened, he saw people, not positions. That is dignity, and dignity isn't loud, it's felt. Seneca too warned against mistaking appearance for character. He said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." This craving, whether for power, attention, or validation, shows itself in how one interacts with those they deem less important. The more someone seeks status, the more likely they are to discard anyone who doesn't help them climb. Even in business, the test is clear. Observe a leader during high stress, not how they address the boardroom, but how they speak to the janitor on a late Friday evening. The true ones thank them. They shake hands. They acknowledge presence without hierarchy, because to the wise, every human interaction is a chance to practice virtue, not performance. Now, you don't need to police people. You simply need to observe, pay attention in the quiet moments. Listen to how someone talks about those who aren't in the room. That's when masks slip. That's when envy and falsehood begin to speak. So let others reveal themselves, not when they're trying to impress you, but when they think no one is watching. That's when their truth walks into the light. And as a Stoic, your job is not to fix them or call them out. Your job is to quietly step away, because the person who disrespects the powerless will one day betray you too, when you no longer serve their ambition. Let that be your filter, not charm, not praise, but humility, because true strength doesn't rise by stepping on others. It lifts without asking for thanks. And the Stoic walks with those who live this truth, not just speak it.
Number 4.
Distinguish between praise and flattery. Not every compliment is a gift. Some are traps, some are tools, some are weapons dressed in silk. And if you don't learn the difference between genuine praise and manipulative flattery, you'll end up mistaking attention for affection and charm for character. The Stoics warned us to guard against those who speak too sweetly, too often, and too soon. Genuine praise is rooted in observation. It's specific. It recognizes real effort or real values. It uplifts without expectation. Flattery, on the other hand, is vague. It's exaggerated. It often appears in the early stages of a relationship, and it moves fast, too fast. Why? Because it's not meant to honor you. It's meant to disarm you. The flatterer seeks access, not connection. They butter you up to get through your defenses. Epictetus told his students to be cautious of applause. He said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." In other words, truth doesn't always sound sweet. Real growth isn't fed by praise. It's tested by silence and criticism. And the moment you become addicted to approval, you give manipulators the keys to your mind. A Stoic remains indifferent to both praise and blame, not because he is cold, but because he is centered. Praise doesn't inflate him, criticism doesn't deflate him. He listens, but he weighs the source, the intent, and the consistency of the person speaking. Think of Oprah Winfrey. Her success brought not only admiration, but also manipulation. She once shared how people would flood her with compliments, only to pivot quickly into asking for favors, introductions, or endorsements. She learned to recognize the pattern. Too much praise followed by a sudden request. Real supporters didn't need to overstate their admiration. They simply stood by her, with or without access. Another key signal is how someone reacts when you don't respond to their flattery. Do they stay warm and respectful? Or do they grow distant, even cold? That change is revealing, because if their kindness was real, it wouldn't evaporate when attention isn't returned. It would remain steady. But flattery, like any tool, is quickly discarded once it fails to deliver results. Taylor Swift, for example, has spoken openly about how she learned to separate sincere encouragement from manipulative praise. Early in her career, people would compliment her constantly, only to become silent or hostile once she drew boundaries. That shift taught her what the Stoics teach. Praise means little if it's tied to expectation. Seneca wrote, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable, but that power weakens when we give weight to every opinion, especially the ones that sound too good to be true." A Stoic listens for patterns, not just praise. He notices if the compliments are earned or if they arrive like bait. So the next time someone showers you with admiration, pause, ask yourself, what have I actually done to deserve this? Is this rooted in reality, or is it designed to win favor? Because clarity isn't about distrust, it's about discipline. And the disciplined mind is not moved by honeyed words or empty noise. It is moved by consistency, truth, and quiet integrity. The Stoic does not need to be admired, he needs to be clear. Because once you learn to separate flattery from truth, you no longer fear manipulation, you see it coming, and you walk right past it.
Number 5.
Monitor their consistency. Anyone can be kind once. Anyone can be generous in public. Anyone can wear a mask for a moment. But consistency, that's the true test. The Stoics believed that virtue wasn't proven by rare acts of goodness, but by steady alignment between one's principles and one's behavior over time. What someone does occasionally reveals little. What they do repeatedly reveals everything. So if you want to uncover deception, don't focus on their peaks. Focus on their patterns. Do they shift their tone depending on who's in the room? Do they mirror your values only when it benefits them? Do they say one thing when it's convenient and another when pressure hits? These subtle shifts are not harmless. They're signs of internal instability, of someone who doesn't know who they are, or worse, knows exactly what they're doing. Epictetus taught that the wise man remains the same in all situations, calm in storms, humble in praise, honest in silence. He said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish." In other words, truth isn't about appearing right in every room. It's about remaining true in every room. That's the essence of inner strength, to choose principle over performance, no matter the audience. Now consider someone like Mr. Rogers. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, but every person who worked with him, from producers to janitors, said the same thing. He was the same man off camera as he was on. Gentle, present, respectful. That's what consistency looks like. Not perfection, but integrity that doesn't depend on the setting. Deceptive people are often chameleons. Around you, they speak of loyalty. Around others, they speak of convenience. And over time, you'll notice they contradict themselves. Their stories change. Their moods swing. Their opinions shift like wind. That's because they're performing, not living, and a performer always forgets a line eventually. The Stoic doesn't chase explanations. He watches for repetition, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself. You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Meaning, when you spot someone's inconsistency, you don't need to fix it or react to it. You need to accept it as data and adjust your boundaries accordingly. Stillness becomes your shield. One way to test consistency is through time. Do they follow through on what they say? Not just once, but over weeks and months? Do they behave the same when others aren't watching? Do they keep their values even when no one's there to applaud them? Because true character doesn't seek an audience. It survives in silence. Actress Keanu Reeves, known for his humility and steadiness, once gave away a large portion of his earnings from The Matrix to the film crew who supported him. But what's more revealing is that he never boasted about it. He didn't post about it. Others did. His quiet consistency, not a public gesture, but a private value, earned him respect. Not because he tried to look good, but because he never needed to. So look closely, not at the highlight moments, but at the in-between ones. The way someone treats a slow Tuesday says more than how they behave on a stage. The Stoic doesn't fall for charm or charisma. He watches for rhythm, because while words can lie and gestures can mislead, patterns always tell the truth. And the truth, once revealed, never hides again. Number 6, observe their attitude when criticized. Praise is easy to accept, but criticism, that's where the mask begins to slip. The Stoics taught that a person's reaction to feedback, especially uncomfortable feedback, is one of the clearest indicators of their inner stability. While the weak lash out and defend, the wise listen, reflect, and refine. The question is not whether someone makes mistakes, it's how they respond when those mistakes are pointed out. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." And criticism, when delivered with truth, is one of those trials. It reveals who's teachable and who's just pretending. Because the envious or insecure person doesn't want growth. They want control. They fear exposure. So when you hold up a mirror, they look away. Or worse, they shatter the mirror and blame you for showing it. Watch closely. When someone is challenged, gently or firmly, do they grow quiet and reflect? Or do they get defensive? Do they mock the critique, deflect responsibility, or retaliate? These responses don't just reveal pride, they reveal fear. Fear of not being seen as perfect. Fear of losing control over the narrative. And most of all, fear that their mask has slipped. In contrast, a grounded person doesn't panic. They may feel the sting, but they stay open. They ask questions. They even thank you for your honesty, because to them, feedback is fuel. It's not an insult. It's an invitation. And this mindset doesn't just come from confidence. It comes from discipline. Take Ryan Holiday, a modern Stoic author. His early writing was heavily critiqued by his mentors, including Robert Greene. But instead of defending his ego, he leaned in. He rewrote drafts, accepted hard truths, and got better. That humility didn't make him weak. It made him powerful, because every correction became a step closer to mastery. Another timeless example, Abraham Lincoln. Known for his humility, Lincoln surrounded himself with critics, people who disagreed with him, challenged him, and questioned his decisions. He didn't silence them, he welcomed them, because he understood what the Stoics understood. That truth doesn't need to feel good to be valuable, it just needs to be heard. And this is why the Stoic doesn't fear criticism. He embraces it as a compass, not a threat. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change." That is the mark of wisdom, not stubbornness, but adaptability, not perfection, but teachability. The truly strong are not those who shout the loudest, but those who can be corrected without losing their calm. Meanwhile, people who erupt at the slightest correction reveal their dependence on image. They want to be seen as wise, not become wise. And that craving for appearances is the very thing that stunts their growth. The Stoic sees this not with judgment, but with clarity. He steps back, not because he's better, but because he values peace over performance. So pay close attention, not just to how people behave when they're praised, but to how they shift when corrected. It's in that moment, the moment of pressure, that real character is revealed, the mask slips, the truth walks in, and the Stoic, ever observant, takes note, not with anger, but with awareness. Because the one who cannot be questioned is the one who should never be trusted. Number 7. Notice unintentional comparisons. Envy doesn't always announce itself with malice. Sometimes it arrives dressed in subtlety, a sideways comment, a faint comparison, a remark that seems harmless on the surface but cuts underneath. The Stoics warned us to listen carefully, not just to what people say, but to what they consistently imply. Because envy, when it can't attack directly, will undermine quietly. It shows up like this. You remind me of someone, though they did it better. Or, that's great, but have you seen what so-and-so just accomplished? These aren't just observations. They're tests, subtle attempts to make you question yourself, to seed insecurity, to pull you off center. And most of the time, they come from people who smile while saying them. Marcus Aurelius trained himself not to be pulled by praise or pierced by comparison. In Meditations, he wrote, "Ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions." That's the Stoic response to comparison. Don't bite the bait. Don't let someone else's insecurity become your reflection. Pay attention to the patterns. Does someone always bring up other people's success when you speak about yours? Do they highlight your flaws next to someone else's strengths? Do they speak in ways that make you feel like you're in competition, even when you're not playing the same game? If so, you're not imagining it. You're being compared deliberately. And this isn't always rooted in hatred. It's often rooted in lack. A person who hasn't accepted their own path will struggle to accept yours. So instead of celebrating your progress, they try to balance the scales by shrinking it. But the Stoic doesn't play that game. He doesn't shrink to fit someone else's comfort. He doesn't inflate to win approval. He just stays steady, grounded in his own virtue. Consider Eleanor Roosevelt, who was often criticized not with insults, but with comparisons to others seen as more charming or glamorous. She didn't fight the comparisons. She didn't beg to be seen differently. She stayed the course. She led with principle, and in time, her dignity outlasted every whisper of comparison, because true strength never rushes to prove itself. Another sign of envy through comparison is false encouragement. Compliments followed by qualifiers. You're doing great for someone your age, or that's impressive, especially with your background. These are not compliments, they're veiled diminishment, and the Stoic hears them clearly, not with anger, but with awareness. Seneca warned that we must not let others define the value of our efforts. He said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Your adversity is not something to be measured against others. It's yours to master. And when someone tries to distort it with comparison, it says more about their unrest than your worth. This is why the Stoic doesn't race. He doesn't rank. He walks his own path, in silence and in truth. He knows that life is not a contest, it's a classroom, and the only person he must improve on is who he was yesterday. So when envy shows up cloaked in compliments and wrapped in comparisons, don't respond. Just see it and let it pass, because the Stoic knows. The need to compare is a symptom of a noisy mind. but you weren't born to compete. You were born to grow. Number 8, pay attention to their reactions to failure. Anyone can pretend to be kind when things are going well, but failure, that's when the truth shows up. The Stoics believe that adversity doesn't create character, it reveals it. And when someone experiences failure, especially public failure, you get a rare glimpse into who they really are. Not just how they treat others, but how they treat themselves. There are 2 paths. One leads to humility, growth, and resilience. The other leads to blame, denial, and self-deception. And the difference between the two is internal strength. The Stoics called this inner fortitude virtues, the moral clarity to face difficulty without collapsing into bitterness or projection. So observe carefully. When someone fails, do they take responsibility or look for someone else to carry the shame? Do they reflect or rewrite the story to preserve their ego? Do they get quiet and focus or loud and defensive? These patterns matter because the one who cannot own their losses is the one who will never evolve. They're not seeking truth, they're seeking comfort. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events, realize this, and you will find strength." In other words, what matters is not what happens to us, but how we choose to respond. And failure is the ultimate test of that response. We've seen this in leaders, artists, and thinkers across time. Consider J.K. Rowling. Before she became one of the most successful authors of all time, she was a single mother on welfare, rejected by multiple publishers. But she didn't use failure to justify giving up. She used it to refine her discipline, to sharpen her voice. Her success was not an accident. It was a quiet rebellion against defeat. Another powerful example is Fred Rogers. Before his show became beloved around the world, he was told by several networks that his soft-spoken tone and slow delivery wouldn't hold attention. Critics called his approach boring, but he didn't change himself to fit a faster world. He stood by his values, and because he didn't fear rejection, he became timeless. His response to professional doubt was not self-pity, but deeper purpose. Now contrast that with someone who always blames others. When things go wrong, they rewrite the script. Suddenly, they were never fully involved, or the rules weren't fair, or someone sabotaged them. That may feel convincing in the short term, but over time, it corrodes trust. It builds a false identity, one that's allergic to truth. Epictetus was clear on this, he said. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That's where dignity is born. Not in perfection, but in honest ownership. A person who meets failure with self-awareness is far more trustworthy than one who meets success with arrogance. So watch closely. How do they speak about their failures? With reflection or resentment? With accountability or avoidance? The Stoic sees failure not as a flaw, but as a furnace. And anyone who refuses to stand in that heat will never be truly strong. So don't just watch how people handle applause. Watch how they handle silence. Don't just observe them at their peak. Watch them in their fall, because the one who cannot face their own weakness will eventually weaponize yours. And the Stoic, always calm, always clear, quietly steps away. Number 9, evaluate how they share personal information. We live in a world where oversharing is mistaken for honesty and self-disclosure is confused with depth. But to the Stoic, what someone says about themselves is never as important as why they say it. When someone talks too much about their greatness, their struggles, or their pain, it often reveals less about truth and more about agenda. The Stoics believe that self-mastery begins with restraint. Seneca said, "Speech is silver, but silence is golden." In other words, wisdom isn't loud. And when someone constantly highlights their own achievements, their tragedies, or their victimhood, it often isn't about connecting. It's about controlling perception. So pay attention to how people talk about themselves. Are their stories balanced, or do they always come out as the hero, or worse, the victim? Do they name drop constantly? Do they bring up their past wounds as leverage for pity or praise? Do they exaggerate their failures to appear humble, or their wins to appear superior? These are all signs, not of clarity, but of distortion. Genuine strength is quiet. It doesn't need an audience. That's why Epictetus warned his students, don't talk about your training, show it in results. The Stoic path is not about declarations, it's about demonstration. A person who truly possesses inner peace doesn't need to remind you of it. You feel it in their stillness. Consider Keanu Reeves. Despite being one of the most recognizable figures in the world, he rarely speaks about his personal life. And when he does, it's never to manipulate sympathy or elevate himself. He shares what's necessary and lets his actions speak for the rest. That is dignity, that is composure, and that is Stoic presence. Another example is Maya Angelou. She experienced deep trauma, poverty, and loss, but she never used her story to gain pity. She used it to teach. Her words were filled with life, but her purpose was clarity. When she spoke about pain, it was not to center herself. It was to help others heal. And that is what separates wisdom from performance. Motive. Now contrast that with someone who constantly reminds you of how much they've suffered or accomplished. Their pain becomes a weapon, their success becomes a billboard, and their story is always bending toward one outcome: attention. That's not humility. That's strategy. It's not disclosure, it's performance. There's nothing wrong with being open, but Stoics are open with purpose. They speak to serve, not to impress. And when someone shares personal information, the question isn't, what did they say? It's, why did they say it? Because motive reveals more than message. Another red flag, gossip disguised as vulnerability. When someone shares private information about others under the pretense of just being honest, that's not transparency, it's manipulation. And if they gossip to you, they'll likely gossip about you. The Stoic listens carefully, not just to content, but to character. So don't be distracted by stories. Watch for stability. Don't be hypnotized by emotion. Look for intention, because words can be crafted, but motive is harder to hide. And the Stoic, calm and clear, stays rooted in observation. In the end, it's not how well someone tells their story that matters, it's how well they live it. Because those who speak the most about who they are often know it the least, and those who truly know themselves have little need to say it out loud. Number 10, listen to your inner voice. When the world is loud, when people flatter you, distract you, compete with you, it's easy to lose touch with the only voice that truly matters, your own. The Stoics didn't call it intuition, they called it logos, the divine reason, the inner thread that ties your soul to truth. And when something feels off, even if you can't explain it yet, the Stoics would tell you to listen. Because deception doesn't always scream. Sometimes it's quiet. It shows up as tension in your chest, a hesitation before you speak, a strange discomfort you feel around someone, even when they haven't done anything obvious. That feeling is not irrational. It's ancient. It's your mind and body detecting small patterns, tiny inconsistencies, unspoken signals, and the wise don't ignore it. Epictetus said, "You have to train your hearing like a musician trains their ear." Meaning, you must learn to hear what isn't said. You must learn to trust the feeling beneath the words, not paranoia, not suspicion, but discernment. And that begins with stillness. Think of someone like Steve Jobs. Known for his intense intuition, Jobs often made major decisions not based on data, but on what he felt was deeply right. Even when others disagreed, he was able to sense energy in people, direction in design, and false alignment in teams. That sensitivity wasn't mystical. It came from presence, from tuning inward, from having the courage to act on what didn't feel quite right. So when you're with someone who makes you feel small, confused, or strangely drained, pay attention, even if they say all the right things. If your nervous system tenses up around them, if your thoughts feel foggy after seeing them, if your confidence erodes subtly each time, you're receiving truth, not from your intellect, but from your core. The Stoics didn't preach distrust, they preached attention. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your thoughts are constantly anxious, unclear, or heavy after being around someone, it may not be your overthinking, it may be your clarity trying to speak through the noise. Another example, Viola Davis has spoken about times in her career where she felt deep down that certain relationships or projects weren't right, even if they looked good on paper. Every time she ignored that voice, she paid for it. And every time she honored it, her life moved forward. Because alignment isn't logical, it's intuitive, and it requires you to trust yourself more than you trust appearances. In fact, many therapists today recognize that what we call gut instinct is the subconscious mind picking up on micro-expressions, tone changes, and patterns. In other words, our body keeps score, even when the conscious mind hasn't caught up yet. That's why Stoic wisdom begins with observation, but ends with trust. Not in the crowd, not in appearances, but in the quiet, knowing inside you. Logos isn't found in noise, it's revealed in awareness. Therefore, the next time you feel something strange around someone, don't explain it away. Don't silence it just because they're nice, or generous, or smiling. Niceness can be a strategy. Generosity can be a tool, smiles can be shields, but energy rarely lies. The Stoic doesn't need proof to honor peace. He knows that the mind sees what the heart already knows. And when that knowing arises, he doesn't debate it, he just walks away. Because peace doesn't always arrive through words. Sometimes it whispers through discomfort, and the one who listens wins. Now that you've seen the 10 signs, the question isn't who around you fits them. It's whether you'll trust what you already know. Because in the end, clarity doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from observation, distance, and discipline. You don't need to expose anyone. You just need to see them clearly and then act accordingly. That's the Stoic way. No drama, no revenge. Just calm detachment from what drains your peace. Remember, the most dangerous people often wear the warmest smiles, but energy never lies. If your spirit feels uneasy, that's all the confirmation you need. Protect it, withdraw your attention, and build a life where only truth can breathe. If this video gave you clarity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. The more eyes see through deception, the less power it holds. Walk with awareness, and as always, stay rooted in reason.